Many hawkers in Singapore are still unwilling to switch to lower sodium salt and sauces despite being engaged by authorities, as CNA finds out. The Health Promotion Board says its target now is to go down to all 110 hawker centres by mid-next year to tell stalls about their options. Now, since July, it has started rounds at about 60 hawker centres. But our reporter Sabrina Ng found out that it is going to be an uphill task. And Sabrina joins me now live in the studio. Sabrina, it's good to see you here.
Good to see you, Shah.
So you've been speaking to hawkers on the ground. Tell us, what have they been telling you?
So over the past 2 weeks, I've been walking the ground and I spoke to about 50 or so stores across 30 or so hawker centres, and that's including popular spots like Maxwell Food Centre, Chinatown Market, and even your neighbourhood, hawker centres. They are tucked underneath a HPB block. And the reason why I went to hawkers first and maybe not restaurants is because often hawkers are, single-owned businesses. Restaurants have more financial power. For them, it's probably easier to do research and development into switching over to lower sodium options. But hawkers are usually, 1 or 2 person or a family-run business. And so I really wanted to get a sense of how they are getting on this push to adopt lower sodium options. So now, many of the centres that I went to, most of them have stores ranging around 80 to 100 stores or so. And across the stores that I spoke to, around half of them told me that they are aware of, the government's push to adopt lower sodium options, but they are not willing to switch yet or hesitant to switch for a variety of reasons. And among these people who, have heard of the lower sodium push, they have actually been engaged by, members from the Health Promotion Board. And so there's also a fraction of them, a segment of them who they have not been engaged by the Health Promotion Board. And they tell me that they are, not aware about these lower sodium options, but are actually curious about them. And so I was wondering if you were curious about what we have here on the table. So I've actually brought to studio two options of lower sodium, one option of lower sodium salt and one option of regular salt. So earlier on, I actually went across the office and I, gave several of my colleagues, a chance to try these out. And nearly all of them but one was able to correctly identify which of the options is lower sodium and which one is regular table salt just by taste alone. So I also spoke to a few hawkers, so let's see what they had to say on that.
Mr. Ronald Ong's specialty are these deep-fried treats stuffed with shredded turnip and pork. The so-called ladle cakes are based on a recipe passed down for generations in his family. But the younger hawker has since tweaked it with lower sodium salt, commonly known as K-salt. And for that, he can display this sticker at his store.
Started about 2 months back when someone from HPB actually came down to introduce the K-salt to me. So they even give me the option of taking out a packet of sample to try it out first, and I did, and then it turned out that it's okay. It does not affect my dishes. I even checked with my customer, do they taste any different in my dishes, and so far none of them are able to identify if there's any change to the taste.
His initial fears about K-salt being more costly were also unfounded. He, along with others, now group buy from the distributor for Tekka wet market, introduced by HPB.
For me, the pricing I'm getting is exactly the same as the salt that I'm using previously, so it does not affect me much. And so far, the cost of this K-salt is quite reasonable for me to switch over, and I even start using it at home.
Still, not all hawkers are convinced. Over at the bustling Maxwell Food Centre, Mr. Gabriel He is hesitant. This despite me spotting HPB staff talking to him about K-salt a day before filming this story. He thinks that some sodium is needed to keep the flavour of his rice dishes. For one, cutting it down could affect how proteins like egg or chicken turn out.
For our products, especially for our marinades, they actually have a fixed sodium content in it. So to accommodate these low sodium alternatives, we actually have to make a lot of adjustments to the recipes, which our customers are actually quite accustomed to the taste of our products. So we are afraid that actually doing so might actually affect the taste of our products.
In fact, many hawkers seem to think that taking a gamble on K-salt might ruin flavours. Even those already approached by HPB are afraid it could drive away customers.
Now, some of them do not wish to be on camera, but they did mention to me that the main reason for this is due to the sheer time and effort it would take for them to research into how to go about switching over to these alternatives. And of course, authorities also face an uphill task in engaging just so many hawkers and catching them at an appropriate time when they're not attending to customers or preparing food for the next day.
With around 110 hawker centres in Singapore, it could take a while to get the majority on board.
So it seems like cost and flavour are the concerns of these hawkers. What are authorities doing to reach out to them then, Sabrina?
So I spoke to the Health Promotion Board in a one-on-one interview, and they shared with me that actually, let's say if a hawker is no longer at the store, or if the store is closed, or they're busy cooking something, then they will go back to the hawker centre and try to approach them for follow-up visits and engage them as far as they can. And during these engagement sessions, actually, they're usually accompanied by a distributor or supplier of lower sodium salt, and they offer the hawkers a chance to sample, like, what I just did around the office. So they can choose, immediately, and they know immediately where is a source for them to get their lower sodium salt from. But of course, it can be difficult to reach just so many hawkers across hawker centres, right? I mentioned just now, there are over 110 hawker centres, around 110 hawker centres in Singapore, 100 stores each. So you can imagine it's thousands and thousands of stores. So from my understanding, across the 60 hawker centres that HPB has already engaged, there might be a few stragglers that it's harder to reach out to them. Their stores may be closed, they may be really, really busy. And so, of course, it's important to engage the help of, associations like the Hawker Association. And so I spoke to HPB, and let's have a listen to what they say on that.
We actually go down to the hawkers over a 6 months period. So first time we'll educate them what are the risks of having higher sodium. Then we give them samples, and subsequently we do follow-up visits. So it's over a couple of visits that we ensure that the hawkers are adopting the lower sodium ingredients.
So it's very labour-intensive. It's a very labour-intensive task of going stall to stall to try to convince the hawkers, as Sabrina earlier said. But given all that effort, is it mandatory for them to switch to lower sodium alternatives?
Well, ultimately, it's still up to the hawkers themselves to choose if they want to switch or not. But as a nation, we are getting more and more health conscious. So it's definitely a plus point for them if they're able to do the switch. And by doing so and by making the switch, they're able to display a lower sodium option sticker on their storefront, which could potentially help them draw in more, customers who are health conscious as well. And on that note, our hawkers will actually be soon more aware and more conscious of how much sodium exactly is going into their food. So the government is planning to launch a labelling scheme that is similar to what is being done currently for sugar and saturated fats in drinks. It's known as Nutri-Grade. So on this scheme, salts, sauces, seasonings, instant noodles, and cooking oil, they could be graded on a scale of A to D. So for instance, let's say, if a salt has a very high sodium content, that could be graded an A. That could be graded a D. So, this shows that our hawkers will probably be more conscious of what are the options and what are the ingredients that are healthier and not so healthy. But of course, we can't just push all the blame on our hawkers, right? Many of them tell me that the reason why they are hesitant to switch is because there still remains a level of consumer choice. So, for many hawker stores, they usually put out a little thing of soy sauce outside. So many of them think that, even if I reduce sodium in my food, my dish, if the consumer thinks that it's bland, they could just ladle a spoonful and add it in, and, it defeats the purpose of what they were doing. So, this change has to come at a gradual pace, and it's really important for consumers to change their palates, which is also something that I discussed with the authorities.
I think it's natural because this is a new initiative, so it will take time. We will continue to work with them, but I think the early adopters are really encouraging because they have started using and they themselves are aware of the lower sodium benefits, lower sodium ingredient benefits.
So it will definitely take time to change mindsets and palates. Remind us again, Sabrina, why it is important to make the switch to lower sodium alternatives.
Well, the latest National Nutrition Survey actually shows that Singaporeans are consuming nearly double the daily recommended amount of sodium. So take, for instance, a hawker favorite like mee soto. Mee soto has nearly 3,700 milligrams of sodium. Now, keep in mind that the daily limit is just 2,000. So in just one meal, you've exceeded your limit for the day. And this is the case for, many hawker dishes that are soupy or are heavy in gravies and sauces. And, the saying goes, too much of a good thing is often a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So excess sodium intake can actually dull our taste buds over time, which leads people to add more salt to their food. And this can actually increase our blood pressure, and it damages the cells of our blood vessels. And to compensate for that, our bodies actually thicken the blood vessels. And the space between each blood vessel becomes more and more narrow. And when that happens, when your blood vessels become more and more narrow, it means that blood clots are more likely to form. Mm-hmm. And if a blood clot, blocks a vessel that is supplying blood to the brain or the heart, this could cause a stroke or a heart attack.
And earlier, you briefly explained to us the difference between K-salt and regular salt. How do lower sodium alternatives work?
Well, many of my colleagues mentioned that they not only look similar, but they tasted pretty similar as well. But that is where the similarities end. So salt and sodium are words that are often conflated for each other, but they shouldn't be used interchangeably. Table salt or regular salt is actually made up of 40% sodium and 60% chloride. But lower sodium salt actually replaces the sodium chloride with other minerals such as potassium. Mm-hmm. And potassium, one fun fact is it can actually help regulate blood pressure. So not saying that, if you're eating K-salt, you are, having a lower risk of high blood pressure, but it's definitely a better option than if you're eating regular salt or excess amounts of regular salt.
Are there other options available apart from K-salt?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the majority of very sodium-heavy dishes are soupy dishes, gravy-heavy dishes heavy in sauces. And so the government is working to help sauce and salt suppliers make their options healthier through a grant. And the grant provides them with up to $600,000 worth of financial support, which they could use for, research or development purposes or marketing purposes to make the cost of their lower sodium options more comparable to regular options. And, hopefully more people will be able to enjoy them. And of course, it's important to target our sodium, our salt and sauce suppliers, as they're the ones who are, supplying these ingredients to our hawkers. So, once our hawkers adopt these changes and switch over, their dishes overall will be lower in sodium, which is better for consumers as well.
I understand, Sabrina, that you had a look at some manufacturing facilities to find out more behind the scenes. Let's have a look.
A symphony of flavors are brewing in these large mixers. The bubbling broth will soon become dark soy sauce, but a much healthier version with about a quarter less sodium than typical ones in the supermarket.
We try to cut back on the sodium and sugar levels through the traditional, not elimination, but reduction of salt and sugar. Sometimes we also undertake, let's say, making a sauce more concentrated so that our consumers don't have to use too much a proportion to achieve the same level of desired taste.
Other ways include adding more spices or boiling it longer to bring out more natural flavors. Chenghua makes a wide range of sauces that mostly go to major restaurants. Right now, at least 5 are low sodium, with more in the works. This much effort requires costly R&D. So the homegrown business took up a grant from the Healthier Ingredient Development Scheme by the Health Promotion Board. Since then, 22 suppliers are on board. That's out of more than 40 local ones, based on an online check. Right now, products with at least 25% less sodium in that similar food category can carry what's called the Healthier Choice symbol.
Having the Healthier Choice logo ensures that there's a value add to a value proposition for our consumers, right? How do we distinguish ourselves from our market industry players, and how do we further segment ourselves from low-cost competitors like Thailand and Malaysia?
Other manufacturers are seizing this opportunity too. Sim Soon Heng Cooking Ingredients started with its oyster sauce formula before changing other staple sauces. They've even created new products like this lower sodium salted egg sauce. But since the firm sells mostly to hawkers, it's also facing issues.
It takes quite hard work to approach a hawker because they are always very busy. Yeah, and also for them to accept lower in sodium sources, which take a big challenge for us, we have to visit them, explain to them that our government is actually promoting healthier choice.
Still, sales for healthier options are up by around 20% over the past year for both manufacturers. They're now looking to expand into the retail space like supermarkets.
Now, we understand that authorities are targeting to engage all 110 hawkers by mid-next year. Sabrina, on the consumer's end, what can they expect next?
Well, if you're looking at the shelves in your supermarkets now, you may feel that, lower sodium options are not as plentiful as regular salt or regular sauces. But actually, one major supermarket group that I spoke to, FairPrice, told me that demand has been increasing steadily. In fact, some lower sodium options have seen increases in sales in as much as 3 times this year, which really reflects, the increase in consumer demand and more health-conscious consumers choosing for these healthier options. And so, reacting to that, they will be looking to expand the range of lower sodium options. So consumers can definitely expect more of these healthier options on their shelves soon.
All right, Sabrina, I appreciate that report. Thank you so much for coming in. Our reporter there, Sabrina Ng, on making the switch to lower sodium alternatives.